This game. My god. For years now, Ocarina of Time has loomed over the games industry like some kind of phantom. No top 10 greatest games of all times list is going to be complete without it, unless you're IGN and then you sandwich it between Minecraft and Civilization at number 34. But whether you see this as the greatest game ever made or just nostalgia bait for the millennial unk demographic, there's one thing nobody can deny. This game is old. Like me. And that brings me to a question I've been thinking a lot about recently. At what point is it okay to remake a game? Because lately it feels like remakes are just absolutely everywhere. Every second week there's another reimagining, another faithful remake, and another company digging through their attic looking for something people liked 20 years ago instead of risking money on something new. You guys like Black Flag, right?
Oh shit, here we go again.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not actually anti-remake, unless you're Naughty Dog, because if I have to look at another fucking Last of Us remaster or remake, I'm going to pull my own goddamn eyes out. But we are rapidly approaching the point where games are being remade before they even have the chance to become old. However, some remakes are genuinely fantastic. Silent Hill 2, Resident Evil, Demon's Souls are absolutely games that deserve modern preservation, or at the very least, a second chance. But what I am tired of is the industry acting like necromancers, resurrecting old franchises that have already had a satisfying ending. Just because, nostalgia is like heroin to anyone over the age of 30.
Oh, remember Bionic Man?
Oh, I remember.
I loved Bionic Man.
Every second week it feels like another company is crawling back to something that was already finished. Another reboot, another revival, and somehow Palpatine's return moment because companies realize that people clap when they recognize something.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
And that's the part that worries me. Not the remakes themselves, but it's that the companies would rather endlessly recycle emotional attachment rather than risk it on something new. Which is why Ocarina of Time is kind of a weird case for me, because despite what I just said, I do really want this. And apparently, I'm not alone. Recently we saw reports from Nate the Hate, the same person who reportedly predicted the Star Fox remake announcement, claiming that Nintendo is planning a full ground-up remake of Ocarina of Time for a holiday 2026 release to coincide with Zelda's 40th anniversary. And if this is real, this is going to be huge. Because Ocarina of Time isn't just another old game. This thing is in almost every conversation regarding the most influential games of all time. Entire genres evolved because of it. The Z-targeting alone basically became the blueprint for 3D combat systems for the next 20 years. Even Elden Ring uses it. And that's why the conversation around this remake has been so interesting to watch. On one hand, you've got people hoping for a Bluepoint-style remake, something super faithful, one-to-one, keep that soul intact, modernize the visuals, and don't touch too much. But then you've got other people saying Nintendo should go way further, expand Hyrule Field, remove loading screens between regions and add entirely new mechanics, maybe rework certain dungeons and maybe even restore cut content like the Light Temple. And honestly, I can see both sides. Because while I love the idea of a faithful remake, I'm also open to expanding on the original, especially because, and I know people get weirdly defensive about this, but most people buying this game have already played Ocarina of Time multiple times. Some changes probably should happen, and not because Ocarina of Time is bad, far from it, but do you just remake a game to make the water look prettier? And speaking of changes, there's also been rumours floating around that Nintendo could potentially split this remake into multiple parts, which I think would just be a complete disaster and would not blow over well with the fans. I would fucking hate it. Because the magic of Ocarina of Time was never just the world itself, it was like the transition, if you know what I mean. It was like, you spend the first half of the game growing attached to Hyrule as a child, learning the towns and meeting the characters, building familiarity with the world, and then suddenly, the game just rips all that away from you. That emotional whiplash was the entire point. Adult Link works better because you already experienced the childhood. You were the child first. That ruined future hits way harder because you experienced the innocence beforehand in one continuous journey. That's the important part. Because splitting that into separate releases would completely destroy the pacing and the thematic consistency that already made the original so impactful in the first place. At that point, it's more like a business decision and not preservation or modernization, which is exactly what gives remakes a bad reputation in the first place. And I know I'm going to get people arguing, oh, but Final Fantasy VII. Come on. outcome. If you actually play both of these games, you would understand why, and Final Fantasy VII is probably one of the very few games that you could actually do that with. If the remake was one complete game, nobody would fucking finish it. The thing would be 140 hours. And I think that's where the line is for me in general. A good remake should modernize the experience, make it easily accessible for newer people to get into. A good remake should modernize access to the game and not fundamentally alter the identity of the experience itself. And because, unlike a lot of these projects, there's actually a genuine argument for accessibility and preservation here. The 3DS version is basically trapped behind dead hardware unless you want to pay some completely psychotic eBay prices. I don't want to have to sell my kidney just to fucking play these games. And yes, technically the original N64 version is available through Switch Online, but let's be real here, for a lot of modern players, that version is becoming harder and harder to go back to. Not mechanically, surprisingly, but that's the crazy part. The combat still feels fairly modern because that Z-targeting was so influential. You could tweak things here and there and maybe even smooth out the movement or modernize the inventory system a little bit, maybe, but the actual foundation still works incredibly well. Visually though, yeah. I know so many people who will flat out refuse to play anything older than the PS3 era, because the second they see that PS1 fog or the N64 polygons, their brain immediately checks out. And so Ocarina of Time feels like one of the few games where I think a remake might actually be needed. Not because graphics old, therefore remake, but because I think it's genuinely important enough that newer audiences have a modern way to experience it. And I think Nintendo knows that, which is exactly why this whole thing makes me nervous, is because this isn't just some random remake announcement. It kind of feels planned. People have been begging Nintendo for an Ocarina of Time remake for over 15 years at this point. It's basically become gaming mythology. It's inscribed on the pyramid walls, for fuck's sake. Every Nintendo Direct, people start convincing themselves it's finally happening. And now suddenly, right as game prices are exploding and nostalgia has become the safest financial investment in the industry, now we might be getting it. Interesting. Especially when Nintendo has already started testing the waters for what people are willing to pay. Recently, that Star Fox Remakes was announced at around $50 digitally and $60 physically. And regardless of where you stand on whether remakes should command full AAA pricing, you can't deny that these companies are absolutely pushing the boundaries of what a remake is worth. But Zelda isn't Star Fox. Star Fox was basically a dead franchise, and Ocarina of Time is like gaming royalty. Nintendo knows people will pay out the arse for this. Of course they will. Which makes me genuinely worried about what the price tag is going to look for this thing. Because Nintendo already operates on a spectrum of pure magical experience and absolute corporate delusion with absolutely no fucking middle ground whatsoever. This is the same company that creates some of the greatest games ever made, while simultaneously shitting on fan projects like Sport. And the worst part is, their games are usually just so good that people accept it. Nintendo treats their fans like an abusive relationship where the makeup sex is just a really, really good video game. Which gives them insane leverage in situations like this, because they realize something really shit for us. People are emotionally attached to Ocarina of Time, including myself. And that's why I feel so conflicted about this whole thing, because Ocarina of Time is exactly the kind of game that makes the remake conversation so messy. This isn't some exhausted franchise like crawling back from the grave for the 15th time. And it's not Hollywood dragging Harrison Ford into the cockpit for another spin.
Disney brought him back. They're gonna make him do this till he's 90.
There's a legitimate argument for Ocarina of Time existing in modern form, but at the same time, I can also see the industry learning the complete wrong lesson from this, that people will pay to relive the past. And I don't want to become trapped in an industry that just keeps repackaging our childhood memories back to us and serving them at an increasingly higher and higher price. I want new IPs, I want studios trying to create the next Ocarina of Time instead of endlessly rebuilding the old one. But at the same time, I'm sitting here like, remake the fuck out of it. And that's why this whole thing feels strange, because for the first time in a long time, I actually think a remake might be justified. I just don't know if I trust the industry learning that lesson.